Welcome to The Medley. I'm your host, Blake Crash Priddle, and this week I am absolutely honored to have my media mentor and former high school teacher, Mr. Jayson Stewart. Mr. Jayson Stewart isn't just an educator, he is also an activist and actor. Today he's going to take us behind the scenes of how he was inspired to become a teacher, how he caught the acting bug, and what inspired him to stand up for social justice. We also took the time to share some stories of some fond memories of working on Spartan Youth Radio, the high school media program that helped me to launch my media career. It's really good to hear from you again, Jayson, and thank you very much for joining us on The Medley this week.
My pleasure. I'm very glad to be here. It's good to be on this side, the interviewee's side, as opposed to being your producer.
That's right. Yes, for those of you that don't know, Jayson was once my producer and is still very much my mentor, who helped me through my journalism career.
It's been an adventure all the way, and I've been very, very impressed and very pleased to see what you've done with yourself.
Thank you so much. Begin by telling us about your ambition to becoming a teacher.
When I was a little kid, I would line up all of my stuffed animals, and I would teach them how to read, which was a pretty big feat for stuffies. So I always pretended that I wanted to be a teacher, and then fast forward into high school, I had changed my focus into environmental advocacy or wildlife biology or what have you, and then ended up in English literature for some reason. And of course, that just lent itself perfectly to teaching. I went down to the University of in Toronto and at York University, and got my Bachelor's of Arts and Education, and then or Bachelor of Education rather, and then taught in Toronto for a bit. Then moved up north, and I've been teaching there ever since.
When you taught in Toronto, what school did you teach at?
Well, I did my practicum, my practice teaching at Lord Dufferin Park School in the downtown inner city of Toronto, and I did half a year of grade 5 and then half a year of grade 7 and 8. And then I moved to North Lee Elementary School, where I was in charge of the grade 7 and 8 English and Arts program and a little bit of health and sexual education, and then moved up to Northern Ontario. And since then I was mostly in the English department, but now I am in the art department.
When you were teaching in Toronto, I hear that you got to meet Colin Mockery. Is that true?
I did, yeah. Colin and his fantastic wife, Deb McGrath, were the parents of a child in my grade 7 and 8 class. So it was fantastic to see them at parent-teacher interviews. I was really excited. I thought, ooh, Colin Mockery, whose line is it anyways? Am I going to need props at a parent-teacher interview? And I was really surprised at how quiet and almost seemingly shy he was. But both him and his wife, just hearts of gold. They gave so much of their time and their energy and donations to the school, and providing the best opportunities for their daughter that they could. So I've stayed in touch with them over the years, and I have yet to work with them on a film project, but we certainly have some similar interests. Both they and myself are supporters of the Welcome Friend Rainbow Camp, which is a summer camp for LGBTQ2+ youth, and so it's good to touch base with them every once in a while on those issues.
Well, I think that you and Colin Mockery would work very well together, given the fact that the two of you have a very similar sense of humor. If you've ever been in Mr. Stew's class, you'll know what I'm talking about, to all the EHS peeps that are still out there.
I think humor is one of the best ways to teach some important, valuable lessons in the world. If you can wrap it up in humor, wrap it up in a joke or a good story, it's something that could be lasting.
So you went from the big city, and then you ended up in Espanola, where you continue to teach to this day at Espanola High School. And I do know that around the time that you started there, you started up a organization called Spartan Youth Radio. I was a big part of that. That helped to kickstart my media career, and it inspired the slogan for this podcast, The Medley. But how did it all start? I don't even know the whole story.
Yeah, well, I was taking teachers take what are called additional qualification courses to become qualified to teach in certain areas, certain things. You might take your phys ed qualifications, or you might take your guidance qualifications, or you might reading or Indigenous languages. And one of the ones I took down in Toronto, because it was free and it was paid for, I loved it, was a media arts program. And one of the schools that we went to had a radio station. Now, it was just a small band. You could only hear it for a couple of blocks type radio station. But I thought, you know what, this new thing called podcasting, this new thing with the internet, I think we could do something like that online. And it was in my brain. And I started the early stages of Spartan Youth Radio back at my old school with North Lee Nights Radio. And we recorded a couple of episodes and sent that out by, I forget even how we had sent it out at that time. But it was a lot of fun, and I got the bug. So as soon as I moved to Espanola High School, I knew that I had to really birth that project into something bigger. And Spartan Youth Radio was the baby, and it lasted for many, many years and provided a lot of opportunities for people like yourself to express themselves and to prove that we're all kinds of different and to celebrate those differences.
Well, I have a lot of amazing memories working at Spartan Youth Radio that I still treasure to this day, including my first interview with Les Stroud, which was nothing short of incredible. There is one story about Spartan Youth Radio. This one time when you and I were doing the interview with Dave Hodge, I remember you inadvertently wrote on the clapperboard using permanent marker, and you quickly ran over to the sink to wash it off. Do you remember that?
I don't, but I now know the secret to dealing with permanent marker on clapperboards. But at the time, I guess I didn't.
So, of all of the people that were featured on Spartan Youth Radio interviews, what one would you say was your favorite?
I've got a couple favorites. Definitely spending the time with Stuart McLean, and your interview with him was fantastic. I think one of my most memorable ones was when I had a student asking. I'd thrown out to the students, if you could interview anyone, who would it be? And I was taking these wish lists and trying my best to make them possible. So one of the students wanted to interview the band. My brain's broken all of a sudden. Billy Talent. They wanted to interview Billy Talent. So I contacted their manager, and their manager said, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll do a 5-minute telephone interview with you." And then they called back a couple days later, and that 5-minute interview turned into a 10-minute interview. And then they said, "Well, you know what? We're going to be in Sudbury. Why don't you come and meet the boys?" So we were really excited about meeting the boys from Billy Talent, and we spent a good chunk of time, around half an hour, 45 minutes with them. And at the end, they said, "So, how are you going to enjoy the concert?" And we admitted that we didn't have tickets; we couldn't afford the tickets. So they just pulled out of their pockets these free tickets that they gave to us, and we passed them out. And the students were just super pumped for it. And then I realized that I was about to take students to this big concert in an arena in Sudbury, the Sudbury Arena. So we quickly called all the parents, and then I called the principal and said, "Sir, what's the policy about this?" He said, "As long as you keep them out of the mosh pit and you have the parents' permission, I say go for it." So we had a fantastic time at that concert. And on the way home, each of them they were silent, and I was wondering why they were so silent, because they had been so pumped. And they all admitted that it had been the very first concert that they had been to, and there were 5 of them with us, 5 students with us. So it was really exciting to spend that time with them, and for such a pivotal time in their life, a moment in their life, to have shared that with all 5 of them.
The other thing that I liked about Spartan Youth Radio was that it wasn't just all different kinds of media, it was different types of personalities, and I think that everyone in their own way stood out. You know, for instance, there was kids that liked video games, there was kids that liked country music and religious music, and there were kids that brought venison stew to the potluck party. That was me, by the way. Remember that?
I absolutely do. Yeah, we wanted to cater to the whole school population, and everyone had an opportunity and were invited to share the things that they were interested in. So we had first-time animators, and we had students who were really interested in sports. So when the Stanley Cup was brought to our school, that was a big thing for those students to sit down with the keeper of the cup. When Rick Mercer was in our school, it was a great opportunity for students to get involved and to chat with such a big media personality. So we tried to provide as many opportunities as possible. When a student would come to me and say, "Sir, can we do this? Can we do this short film? Can we do this interview with this celebrity? Can we talk about this political issue?" It was always, "Yep, let's get it done. Let's do it. Let's find a way."
As you were working on Spartan Youth Radio, I recall that you were in a couple of independent TV shows and independent movies. One movie was called Black Forest, which was filmed, I believe, in the Massey area or Elliott Lake area of Ontario. How did you become involved with acting in independent features such as that one?
Well, that film by a local art producer in the North Bay area had been in the Sault Ste. Marie area. Black Forest, yeah, David Briggs did that one, and he had posted that he was looking for an abandoned building that could be used as a lair for a serial killer. And I lived out in the country, and I knew a lot of possible places that were abandoned or looking abandoned, or that we could possibly get into. So I invited him out for a day to explore the community, and we checked out all of these different buildings, these different opportunities. And partway through the trip, he said, "You're an actor, aren't you?" I said, "Well, I really haven't done much, mostly stage acting, but it's been years." He said, "Well, I want to give you a role in the film as a thank you." I'm like, "Well, that's fantastic." And then it ended up to be the lead villain role, the serial killer role that I played, and so I got the bug. And since then, I've been throwing my name out in auditions. I have an agent with Quincy Talent, and so I've done some television, I've done some film, and now a lot of my work is going into voiceover work.
And one of your more recent voiceover gigs was an audiobook. What was the audiobook that you narrated? I've heard about it, but I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, so MJ Spickett is an Espanola-based author, and she writes in a variety of different genres. One of her genres that she focuses mostly on is fantasy, and she has the first series called Raven's Child that she had been wanting to get turned into an audiobook for the 20 years that she has had that book in existence. So she edited it and made it more contemporary, and I offered my services to narrate it for next to nothing, just a couple $100, because I believed in her as an author. And so that went and is now available on Amazon, Audible. So you can look for Raven's Child by MJ Spickett, narrated by Jayson Stewart. And from there, I actually got the paid contract to do the second book in that series, and hope to do the rest of the series as well. Beyond that, I've done one of my largest projects beyond that was actually narrating stories from the Quran. I was hired by a company in Egypt to narrate over 150 different segments on the Quran. So I'm spreading my voice across the world. My next big one was a video game, which was a lot of fun as well, where I played a kind of a evil villain, Lex Luthor type character.
In the live-action movie that you did, Black Forest, I had the opportunity of seeing that. I actually still have the DVD somewhere. It might actually be at my parents' house, but when I first watched it, I thought to myself, it is so funny listening to my English teacher drop the F-bomb and the C-bomb, because normally you are telling us to watch our language.
Here's the little secret about that script. It didn't have the swearing in it. That was all me, Blake. I added that to. I thought that the character needed a little more spice. He's a redneck serial killer. He wouldn't have perfect diction, and he wouldn't stray away from the saltier language.
Did you come across any challenges filming that particular movie? Because I know that a lot of the scenes were filmed out in the bush and in a rural area, so I can imagine that you were exposed to the elements quite a bit.
Oh, definitely. It was the biggest challenge was finances. It was pretty much a zero budget project. We were all donating our time, our services, and our expertise to it. So unlike most film projects, there was no craft services. We supplied our own Tim Hortons food and coffee to keep us going. We had the camera equipment rented only for a certain period of time, so we had to be very good with our time, and if that meant working very long hours, so be it. I think we almost did a full 24-hour part where we filmed nonstop and were exhausted, but that it certainly brought us together as a cast and crew. And certainly, yeah, being out in the woods, being out in the environment. I remember at one point we were filming a scene on a beach, and we were hit just by a deluge of rain and fortunately, part of the scene included being in a tent, so the whole cast and crew crawled into the tent and waited out the storm, hoping that we weren't going to be washed off into the lake. It was an adventure. I'm not sure how many people would want to do that again, but it gave me a real push to become a filmmaker myself. So that looking around and seeing what had been done and scrambled together with just people who had the heart for filmmaking, I knew that it was something that I needed to do and that I could do.
Another film that you made, I believe it was called The Philanthropist, that was actually filmed not too far away from my childhood home, Faraway Road, Ontario. It wasn't filmed on the road, but very darn close to it. And I believe you did that film with Dylan White, who is a artist on Manitoulin Island who's best known for making chainmail. Very talented man.
Yes, no, that film, the very last scene was filmed behind the former OK Tire on the highway there near Faraway Road. But the majority of it was filmed at actually another teacher of yours, Mr. Medill, Glenn Medill's house in Gore Bay, an old Victorian house that he's been renovating for years now. And it was in early parts of renovations where we filmed the majority of the film there on Manitoulin Island. And it was just the perfect set for what we needed for a creepy film like The Philanthropist. Yeah, Dylan did fantastic with that film. Dylan White, such a talent. He's been involved in almost every project that I've done, and it did very well on the film circuit, the film festival circuit, and he won. I believe it was 3 different Best Actor nods, 2 of which were in Germany. Germans just love his character, I guess.
You directed a film, I know that, called Resilience, I believe. That's how you pronounce it. It's set on a reservation somewhere in Ontario. That was just a short film, but it was supposed to be like the beginning of what was supposed to be a feature-length film or something. Is that correct?
Yes, Resilience was my first film, and it was the one that was best. It was most funded. A lot of support from Segmar Gona-Schnabek and a variety of other producers, and that was filmed in the Massey area and off of Lee Valley Road in the Espanola area, so all local stuff. And that was kind of a proof of concept film, a zombie film. We have the whole script. The complete script is sitting in a drawer, waiting for the right producer, because I realized that it needed a development budget that I simply don't have access to. So hopefully Resilience could be done as a film in the future. I haven't given up on it. If not as a film, I'm thinking of developing it as a radio play, tying into the podcasting and the voiceover work that I've been doing. So yeah, I wrote and directed Resilience, wrote and directed The Philanthropist, and then directed a comedy by Martha J. Hayes called Overdue, which also featured Dylan White as one of the lead characters. And I've got a couple projects that I'm currently working on. They probably won't be ready this year, but I'm looking at filming next summer. Yeah, the one that I'm focusing the most attention on is an ecological, psychological, supernatural revenge film. So it ties a bunch of different genres together, and the way I like to think of it is, what if David Suzuki were the Crow? And that's all I'm going to say about it.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's should be a fun small cast, mostly filmed outdoors. But I think it's something that I can scramble together next year.
I know that you have done a lot of activism for the Indigenous communities across Canada. That is something I know that you care very deeply about. But what led you to becoming an advocate for Indigenous people in the first place?
When I was in high school, I was known as Eco Boy or Tree Hugger. A lot of my focus was on environmental issues, and that's really where I saw my activism as kind of sticking to environmental issues. And I began to ask myself why I was so dedicated to that, and I realized that it wasn't as much a concern about saving the planet as it was to saving my own species on that planet and trying to reduce our ecological footprint. And the best model for that is the traditional and contemporary ways of Indigenous peoples from around the world. Connections to the land, spirituality that is land-based, language that is land-based. Those are all things that really intrigue time with, the more I realized how much as a society we needed to do to work towards truth and reconciliation, and that it wasn't that we're all treaty people, that we're all here in Canada, all treaty people, and have a responsibility for that. So then I took a look at other people that I've seen as mentors and as role models. So people like David Suzuki and his daughter Severin, people like Gord Downey from the Tragically Hip, and all of these people who were embraced by Indigenous communities and who were acting as allies, standing alongside and behind Indigenous activism. So that's something that's always impressed upon me. And I think my mom and dad being very open-minded and being very social justice oriented too certainly helped with that. And that's why I have such a focus on that, on poverty issues, on the LGBTQ community, because we're all in this together. So if I have a voice, if I have some privilege that I can use to elicit some change in our world, then I'm going to do that. And I think that's part of my responsibility.
While we're on the topic of social justice, another Spartan Youth radio memory just came back. Remember we went to the Indigenous Peoples Education Day conference in Sudbury where Crystal Shawanda was there, and we got to interview her for a second time. We did one that was over the phone, and then this one was in person, and she got to tell her story about the discrimination that she faced and how she overcame that. We got to learn about Indigenous culture while we were there. We got to try some different foods like smoked fish and the like, and that was quite the experience, wasn't it?
It was a fantastic experience, and meeting such talent as Crystal Shawanda that week, that day was fantastic. We also, it wasn't your interview, but we also had two other interviews. One with Plex, who is a hip hop artist, and Wanique Horn-Miller, who is a former Olympian, and she was involved in the Oka protests when I think she was around 13 or 14, and she was actually stabbed by a bayonet held by one of the Quebec Army soldiers that was part of that Oka crisis. So yeah, meeting those people and sharing that type of information with students and learning alongside students is all what my teaching is about, and certainly what made Spartan Youth Radio such a unique project.
Well, like you, I've met lots of Indigenous people, and I actually worked with them during my time up in Northwest Territories and in the PA, and I met some residential school survivors as well. They got to share their stories. It's a very shameful aspect of Canadian history, and it's something that we need to acknowledge, and we need to work to make sure that things like this never happen again.
Well, exactly, and to understand that it's not history. Residential schools and the cycle of poverty, all of these things are not history. They are the living now. They're part of our lives and the lives of our fellow Canadians and those that don't identify as Canadians but live on this land and have lived on this land since time immemorial. It's the now. We are going to be someone's history, so we need to make sure that we're doing right by that history.
Well, Jayson, I really enjoyed talking with you again, and it was great to have you on the show, and I look forward to hearing those new audio documentaries and seeing more of your movies and TV shows down the road.
Likewise, Bob. I've really enjoyed this time chatting with you. I'm going to be really shameless here, and I'll plug my website if you don't mind. But most of my activism and my art and my work is done through Lapse in Judgment Studios, which is my own production company. So that's LAPSIN JudgmentStudios.com, Lapse in Judgment Studios, and I encourage people to reach out. And if there's a project that they want to partner with and collaborate with, I'm always looking for new ideas.
And that was Mr. Jayson Stewart, my former high school teacher and actor and activist. Be sure to check out his IMDb profile to find out what other projects he's been involved with. Until next time, here at The Medley, we're all kinds of different.